The Buckeyes are back to being the hottest team in college football. I'm an Ohio State fan. I was at the Rose Bowl game, and I have to say, going up 34-0 in the second quarter against Oregon, that felt really, really good. I don't know if I can recall another time when an Ohio State team was so locked in and in tune with each other when you look at the coaching staff and the players. Implementing the game plan, executing the game plan. This Ohio State team is playing at a very, very high level right now, and if they continue to play anywhere close to this level, not even the same level, just anywhere close to this is not only the Ohio State team we thought we were getting, this kind of super team, but also there's no one in the country that can beat them. Let's start with Jeremiah Smith. He's an absolute freak. He was the best player on the field in the Rose Bowl. He's the best offensive player in the country. He's a cheat code. It's crazy to think about Marvin Harrison Jr. Ohio State fans kind of forgot about him. He was such a good player for Ohio State the last couple of years. He leaves and goes to the NFL. You have Jeremiah Smith come in, and he's better than Marv as a true freshman, which is wild to think about. The entire game plan against Tennessee and against Oregon is to get Jeremiah Smith the ball and get him the ball early. Ohio State scored 1 minute into the game, thank you to Jeremiah Smith taking that ball 40-plus yards for a touchdown. Double coverage, triple coverage, throw the ball up. They're scheming him open. There's nothing Tennessee and Oregon could do to stop him, and I don't know how Texas can stop it either. You also have to give a big shout out to Will Howard. He's playing at the best football of his career right now. No turnovers, and honestly, really no turnover-worthy throws, unless I'm forgetting something in that game. But he's locked in. He's making good decisions. His deep ball placement is very, very accurate. That was something that was a little bit of a struggle and really a question mark earlier this year. He's locked in right now. Him and Jeremiah Smith are clicking. They're on the same page. Emeka Egbuka looks really good. He's a really, really good number 2 option, and people forget about him. You have 5-star Cardell Tate that barely gets the ball, but he's a great third option. The running backs are playing well. Travion Henderson has the big playability. We saw him break that long touchdown run. He's also averaging like 10 yards a touch in these playoffs. And then defensively, this team is playing violently on that side of the ball. Oregon had nothing going for them in the first half until they scored that touchdown right before halftime. They finished the game with like negative 20 yards rushing or something like that because you account for sacks. Ohio State had 6, 7, 8 sacks, something like that. This Ohio State defense has been good all year. They did have that little blip on the radar. When they played Oregon, Denzel Burke and that secondary just got torched in that game. But outside of the Oregon game, this Ohio State defense has been really good all year. The linebackers and guys like Cody Simon have really come along in the second half of this season. The defensive line, Tyleik Williams, Jack Sawyer, JT, these guys are playing very, very well right now, and they're getting pressure on Dylan Gabriel, on these quarterbacks without having to need the additional pressure, the blitzes, etc. And then they have the best safety duo in the country, Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom. Caleb Downs is playing down to the box, almost like his own level. He almost had multiple interceptions in that game. Lathan Ransom's coming down and run support. When this Ohio State team is playing violently like they are on defense against Oregon, and then when the offense is clicking like it has been against Tennessee and Oregon, this is a super team. And Ohio State fans thought that there was potential for this with how stacked the roster is. And you never really saw it. You saw bits and pieces of it here and there, but you never saw it fully put together like we have in these playoffs so far. Going into the playoffs, I was concerned about Ryan Day and him being outcoached by not necessarily Josh Heupel, but looking forward to the Oregon game and Dan Lanning. I mean, Dan Lanning outcoached Ryan Day when they played in Eugene earlier this year, and I was worried about that happening again. But actually, Ryan Day outcoached Dan Lanning. Ryan Day and the staff got Ohio State ready to play so well, jumping out to that lead, punched them in the mouth. Dan Lanning and Oregon had no answer that early on in the game. I mean, being down 34-0 in the second quarter, it's not impossible to come back, but it kind of feels like it. Ryan Day and Chip Kelly having the game plan to where there's nothing Oregon could do defensively to stop Jeremiah Smith and Will Howard in the first half. Then once the defense is back on their heels because of how explosive that pass game is, then that opens up the run. Then you see Quinshaw Judkins coming up with chunk yardage in the run game. Travion Henderson coming up with big runs. Then we saw that big run in the second quarter for a touchdown where he popped the big one. And Ryan Day didn't do any like the cute stuff, the crafty stuff that Dan Lanning did the first time around, but you don't have to do that when you're up 34-0 in a playoff game, right? So I don't know what happened between the Michigan game and the Tennessee game, but whatever they did worked. I mean, I will say we did know there was a players-only meeting. Obviously, the coaching staff got together and said, we have to figure out our identity on offense. We need to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith early and often, and clearly that's what they need to do, and that's working to perfection right now. And just being at that game, it's almost like it didn't really feel real when they went up 34-0. I was waiting for some flags, I was waiting for an injury, I was waiting for something to go wrong. And look, Oregon did try to crawl their way back a little bit, and we knew they'd put up some points and put up a fight, scoring that touchdown, getting the 2-point conversion right before halftime. getting the ball back after half, scoring again. It's like, all right, 34-15, trying to make it a game. Then I think they get another stop, but then Ohio State gets a stop and then an answer or something like that. But they didn't really control the middle eight, as Ryan Day calls it, and that's true. They didn't do that. But in that third quarter, they got the stops when they needed it. They got the touchdown score when they needed it to really just put that game away and just put a stop into any effort of a comeback that Oregon was trying to come up with. But going to a playoff game like this, I mean, it was a pretty good crowd. It was pretty close to 50-50, I think. Some people think there was more Oregon fans than Ohio State fans. Some people think there was maybe more Ohio State fans than there were Oregon fans. Kind of hard to tell because most of the Oregon fans stayed for the entire game. I think some were filtering out fairly early on, in the halftime. But Ohio State getting the ball and then scoring a touchdown within 1 minute to start the game, the Oregon crowd was never into the game. And eventually they tried to get loud when they scored that touchdown to start the third quarter. They think they have a little momentum now. It's like, okay, here's our only chance to get something going here. So then the Oregon crowd came to life, and it was weird to hear because they had been completely removed from the first half of that game. As an Ohio State fan, obviously I loved it. And looking how the Tennessee game went, I mean, obviously you felt pretty good going into the Rose Bowl game against Oregon. But no one saw this coming. No one saw a 34-0 lead for Ohio State in the second quarter. Some Ohio State fans did think that they were going to win this game by, 3 touchdowns or something like that. I thought it would be more like a field goal type game. But when this Ohio State team is playing like this and clicking like this, and they've done it for 2 consecutive games now, nobody can stop them, including Texas. And now let's talk Texas a little bit here. Sark got the best of the Buckeyes the last time he played them, which I think was the 2020 National Championship game when he was the offensive coordinator for Alabama. They had the Heisman winner, Devontae Smith. Complete matchup nightmare, obviously, moving him around everywhere in the backfield, putting him in motion, lining him up in the slot, which meant the Ohio State linebacker, Tough Borland, was matched up with him, and that was a complete mismatch. But this Ohio State defense has improved so much and is drastically different than the last time Sark went up against them. Instead of having that linebacker, Tough Borland, matched up on Devontae Smith, and I'm not saying Texas has Devontae Smith, but that type of player and that type of matchup, that's now going to be Caleb Downs. What a major upgrade that is. I think there's question marks about Quinn Ewers, former Buckeye, shout out. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he has a ceiling. You saw what happened when they played Georgia twice this year, looked all out of sorts, couldn't get in a rhythm at all, turning the ball over. And if this Ohio State defense continues to play violent, aggressive, they're generating pressure, Caleb Downs is flying all over the field, and they're not giving up big plays, Quinn Ewers is going to be in for a very long day. Texas has a pretty good defense, and I've been saying that all year, but the cheat code here is Jeremiah Smith. When Ohio State is utilizing Jeremiah Smith like this and they're scheming him open, there's almost nothing that the opposing teams can do. And even if they throw just everything at taking him out of the game, you have Emeka Egbuka, Travion Henderson, Quidshot Judkins, Carnell Tate. G. Scott's playing well in the tight end position. I don't know about a score prediction yet. Obviously, you need to dive into the matchup a little bit more. You're kind of tempted to say, Ohio State by 17, 20, 24, just based off how the first 2 games went. And it's not that it's a lack of faith in Texas as much as it's just sheer confidence in this Ohio State super team that we're now finally seeing.